Learning a new language is, I think, one of the most demanding and truly transformative experiences you can possibly undertake.
It really is.
It's not just about memorizing flashcards. It forces this intense, multifunctional reorganization of your brain's entire architecture. You know that feeling, right? You're exhausted after a long study session.
Hmm.
And that's because you've given your neural circuits a complete and total workout.
And that's exactly what we're going to get into today. Our mission here is to unpack the science behind accelerating language acquisition.
Hmm.
We're looking at everything from the neurological systems that fire up when you learn a new word
Right.
to the surprising challenges of just hearing a new sound and even the emotional side of things.
Mm-hmm.
If you can understand the brain's, let's call it a user manual for language,
Yeah.
you can immediately cut down on the frustration and just massively boost your results.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with the physical hardware. When we talk about learning a new skill, we always hear this term brain plasticity. What does that actually look like structurally when we encounter a new language?
Well, it looks a lot like high-level traffic management.
Traffic management, okay.
Exactly. Neuroscience reveals that language learning isn't just happening in one little spot. It's a hugely distributed process that strengthens connections across, well, virtually every region.
So we're talking about audition, vision, memory.
Audition, vision, comprehension, memory, speech production. They all have to coordinate. They all have to be brought online at the same time.
So a full team effort in the cortex. Who are the star players in that lineup?
We can identify 4 regions that are really doing the heavy lifting. First, located in your frontal lobe, you have Broca's area.
Chica's area. All right.
This is the structure responsible for verbal fluency, for grammatical structure. It takes your abstract thoughts and figures out how to string them into coherent sentences.
Ah, so that's the part that just, freezes up mid-conversation when I'm searching desperately for the right tense. The words are there, but the structure just vanishes.
That's Broca's bottleneck right there. Then, in the temporal lobe, we have Wernicke's area. So if Broca's is putting the words out, Wernicke's is bringing them in. It's essential for understanding the meaning of incoming words and phrases. It's all about comprehension.
Comprehension and production. But those two parts don't actually store the knowledge, do they?
No, for storage, we need the hippocampus.
Yeah.
This is the memory consolidation hub. It's what transfers vocabulary, grammar rules, all of it, from short-term holding into long-term retention. It's absolutely crucial.
And finally, what manages that incredible pressure of trying to switch between languages, without accidentally throwing in a word from the wrong one?
That complex switching and filtering, that's the job of the prefrontal cortex.
The boss.
Think of it as the ultimate traffic cop. This region handles all the executive functions: attention, decision-making, and critically, inhibition. When you're fluent, that traffic cop is super efficient. It successfully suppresses interference from your native language and tells your brain exactly which system to activate.
That makes so much sense why practicing a language is so draining. Your brain is constantly running this executive function firewall. Okay, let's talk about that transfer then. We all feel that frustration when a word just won't stick. Is there a real neurological difference between just, say, rote memorization and true, lasting learning?
Absolutely. The conversion from fleeting knowledge to true, effortless fluency. It happens in 3 interconnected stages.
Okay.
The first is initial processing, and this relies on your working memory. When you're actively listening or reading, your working memory holds that new information in real time. This is why language classes feel so intense.
Because your brain is just trying to make sense of everything coming in right then and there.
Exactly. That active engagement is step 1. Step 2 is consolidation.
Right, getting it to stick.
This is the transfer of that content from your short-term, effortful working memory into long-term storage. Now, this process relies heavily on repetition and context, but the often overlooked secret weapon is quality sleep.
Ah, the sleep connection. That's where the magic happens, isn't it?
It really is. Think of it this way. When you're learning, you're stuffing a box full of notes. That's your working memory. When you sleep, the hippocampus acts as, like the librarian, sorting and filing those notes permanently onto the long-term memory shelves.
I love that analogy.
And this whole process is strengthened significantly if the content was learned in varied and, this is important, emotionally relevant contexts. If you had a fun role play or an engaging conversation, the memory trace is simply stronger.
So repetition is important, but meaningful, positive, contextual repetition? That's like a neural supercharger.
Precisely. And the final stage is automatic activation and fluency. This is achieved through immense active practice, immediate feedback, and a technique called repetizo espacada, or spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition, yeah.
Your brain starts to automate these linguistic patterns, meaning you need less conscious effort from that overworked prefrontal cortex to build sentences. And that's the moment you transition to truly thinking in the new language.
That clicks. It's moving from conscious calculation to something more like muscle memory. Okay, let's go from that general blueprint to a very specific and often invisible challenge, sound perception. The sources you brought highlight this fascinating study on native Portuguese speakers learning Spanish.
Yes.
The languages are so close, you'd think it would be simple, but they run into these massive hurdles just differentiating sounds.
Well, this takes us into the realm of linguistic consciousness, your ability to reflect on and manipulate language, and specifically phonemic consciousness.
Phonemic, so the smallest units of sound.
The smallest sound units that actually change the meaning of a word. For these learners, the core difficulty wasn't vocabulary or grammar, it was all about the phonology.
So what were the problematic sound pairs they looked at?
They focused on three pairs where perception was difficult.
Yeah.
S versus Z, L versus W, and the rhotic contrast, R versus R.
Okay.
And the difficulty comes from a really common second language problem. Sounds that are critical, meaning changing units in your target language, are just acceptable variations in your native language.
Let's use that rhotic sound, the R sound, as an example, because that's perfect.
Okay, think of it like this. Phonemes, or phonemes, are like the currency of a language. If you change the coin, you change the value. In Spanish, the rhotic RA, soft single R, and the R rolled double R are distinct phonemes. Changing one changes the meaning entirely.
Right, like the classic example, pero versus pero.
Exactly. Pero, but, versus pero, dog. If you mix up those sounds, you've completely changed what you're saying.
So that's a high-stakes differentiation.
Extremely. But in Brazilian Portuguese, those different ways of pronouncing R are often what we call allophones. They're variations of the same sound that do not change the meaning. They're like different fonts. They don't affect the core value.
So a Brazilian learner's ear is literally trained to ignore that difference because it never mattered before.
It never mattered. And this is where it gets really interesting. The study had a surprising finding about consciousness. You would assume the students who could simply hear the difference were the successful ones. But that wasn't the case at all.
So what did the results actually show?
Well, the initial perception test was a complete disaster. When students were simply asked to recognize if similar sound pairs were different, their accuracy was shockingly low.
How low?
As low as 6% correct for the RR contrast. Their raw, implicit perception just failed them.
6%. That's basically random chance. So how did they prove the knowledge was actually there, but just hidden?
The game changed completely when they introduced the interview task. Students were asked to verbally justify their answers, to explain why a word belonged to one language versus the other. They had to articulate the rule.
So they had to make it conscious?
They had to make it conscious. And when they were forced into that level of explicit reflection, their performance for that same R contrast skyrocketed. In one measurement, it hit 94% correct.
Wow, that's a massive jump. They went from, I think that sounds different, to, I know that sounds different because the Spanish system requires the sound to be a separate unit.
Precisely. The ability to verbally justify the difference, which researchers called the explicit 3 level, proved to be a far better predictor of true knowledge than simple perception. It shows that moving knowledge from that implicit procedural form to an explicit verbalizable form is crucial for mastery. You have to be able to talk about the system to truly master it.
That's a crucial insight. So the brain has to hear the sound correctly and consciously analyze it. But what happens when that information lands and you actually need to use it? That's where we hit the cognitive bottleneck. Working memory.
Working memory is central to second language performance because it's your brain's active RAM. It's the temporary space where you hold, process, and manipulate information.
Right.
When you're in a conversation, you're holding the incoming sentence, searching for its meaning, planning your reply, and inhibiting your native language, all in a few seconds.
That is just an immense cognitive load.
It is. Researchers use these specific time tests to measure this capacity, things like Operation Word Span or Reading Span tests. And the finding is clear. Your raw mental processing capacity significantly correlates with success in complex language tasks, especially comprehension, sentence processing, and speaking fluency.
So if your working memory is overloaded, everything just slows to a crawl. That makes the argument for automation, getting those grammar patterns into long-term memory, even stronger.
Absolutely. The less conscious effort you spend just holding basic grammar and working memory, the more space you have to understand nuance or plan a complex reply. But here's the pivot. Proficiency relies on more than just pure mental horsepower. It relies heavily on emotional endurance.
I see this in every language classroom. The student who is brilliant but afraid to speak often stalls out. This brings us to the non-cognitive aspect, socio-emotional skills.
Correct. These skills, the capacity to engage, to persevere, to manage failure, are now highly prioritized by major global educational frameworks. This comes from the need for integral education, which means educating the whole person, not just boosting cognitive scores.
What are the key socio-emotional factors that researchers are focusing on?
Well, the research identifies 5 major factors. Let's make them relatable. First, openness to experience. That's the student who is curious and willing to sound completely silly, who dares to make a mistake.
I know that student. I wish I were that student sometimes.
Second, conscientiousness organization, self-discipline, perseverance, the ability to stick to that spaced repetition schedule even when it's dull. Third is extroversion, confidence, and sociability.
Willing to start a conversation.
Exactly. Fourth, cooperativeness, tolerance, collaboration, working well in groups. And finally, and this is a big one,
What keeps us from melting down when we don't understand a whole paragraph?
emotional stability, self-control, and calmness. Managing frustration is paramount when you're facing that cognitive load. And these skills aren't just personality traits, they are trainable.
The sources detail a fascinating public school study where an intervention focusing on these skills led to some remarkable results. What was the setup?
The intervention was highly focused and active.
Yeah.
A role-play job interview conducted entirely in English. These were students who initially showed deficits in key areas, particularly a lack of focus and curiosity. They were pushed into a high-pressure, realistic scenario that demanded cooperation and confidence.
So they were forced to use all 5 skills at once in a meaningful context. What was the outcome?
The results were profound. Post-intervention, students reported feeling transformed. They gained confidence and, crucially, curiosity. They self-reported better English performance. One student, quote, summarized it perfectly. They said they never thought they could record an interview speaking English, but now felt more curious to learn. The intervention demonstrated that fostering cooperation and confidence directly led to measurable linguistic gains by addressing the holistic needs of the learner.
This is so critical. It shows that sometimes the biggest bottleneck isn't the grammar rule itself, but the self-belief required to actually use the rule. So, we've covered the neurological structure, the challenge of phonetic awareness, working memory, and the emotional scaffolds. Now, let's bring it all together. What practical strategies are proven to work?
Okay, we can leverage neurolearning research right away. First, use multimodal stimuli. You need to hit all 4 of those brain areas we discussed.
Right.
Engage multiple senses at once. Watch videos, write vocabulary by hand, speak aloud, perform physical tasks. The more senses involved, the more pathways you create for retention.
Engaging the motor, visual, and auditory systems all at once makes perfect sense.
Next, prioritize contextual and emotional learning. Since we know the hippocampus files memories better when they're emotionally relevant, learn language in real-life contexts, simulations, themes from daily life. Positive associations make memories stick.
And since we know memory consolidation happens when the brain is resting, timing is key.
Absolutely. Strategic rest and sleep are non-negotiable. Break up your learning into short, focused sessions with breaks. The Pomodoro technique is a perfect example. And ensure you get quality sleep. That is prime time for memory consolidation. Also, rigorously apply spaced repetition.
Reviewing at increasing intervals.
Exactly, to actively strengthen those neural connections and fight the natural forgetting curve.
And to keep that prefrontal cortex engaged and happy, and to avoid frustration.
Gamification and immediate feedback. Use challenges, quizzes, real-time corrections. The brain responds beautifully to light challenges and tangible rewards, making the whole learning process more pleasurable and sustainable.
This brings us to the conclusion of the professionals. What theoretical models do professors and educators actually rely on when they build a curriculum?
The consensus is overwhelmingly interaction-based. A study of professors showed the clear dominance of the sociocultural theory, championed by Vygotsky, cited by over 83% of those surveyed.
83%, that's a huge majority.
It is. And that's followed by the interaction hypothesis from Long.
So in plain English, what does that mean for you, the learner? Why should we care about Vygotsky's theory?
It means the pros agree. You learn best when you're talking, interacting, and socially struggling your way through the language. These theories prioritize social context, meaning negotiation, and co-construction of knowledge. The modern view confirms that language acquisition is fundamentally a social act, not just an individual cognitive download.
So you now have a complete science-backed picture. Language mastery integrates the structure of your cortex, conscious reflection on sound, the capacity of your working memory, and maybe most importantly, crucial social and emotional support.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, drawing from the complex dynamic systems theory mentioned in our sources, it's important to remember that L2 competence should never be viewed as reaching some fixed final state. You don't just cross a finish line and become fluent.
So what does that constant evolution mean for the concept of mastery then?
It means L2 competence is a continuous dynamic system. It adapts and evolves constantly in response to every new interaction, every new experience, every person you speak to. The system is always learning and rebuilding itself.
So true mastery is understanding that you are never truly finished learning.
Exactly. It's a perpetual journey.
A perpetual journey of dynamic evolution. Take these science-backed insights and apply them to your own journey, starting today.